fellow travelers, and welcome to The Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and as always, I will be your host and gracious guide along the way. And today, we're diving straight back in where we left off last week. We have the second part of our conversation with Tom Greder, and he asked me a question that just was ringing out in the ether, waiting to be answered. And I will repeat the question when the time comes, so that you know where we're at as we jump straight back in. And I have been advised that it would be good to say, not just in the end of the episode, where most people turn it off before it's finished, is to say, if you do enjoy this podcast, it would be great if you shared it on social media, if you made a little post about it, or just said that you listened to it. And if you would like to support me even more in this podcasting venture, then it would be amazing if you visited our shop. There is a shop where you can buy t-shirts and singlets and stuff. And my incredible wife, who has done the design for the logo and organized these t-shirts, we're hoping to get some further stuff to buy in the shop. And just like that, we're about to jump straight back into the conversation. Anyway, one interesting thing for myself in doing this, I'm relatively new to the conversational aspect of podcasting, and that is that this conversation that I had with Tom, it's the first time when me and Tom really have a long conversation like this. So that's a beautiful thing about this podcast, is as it has opened up conversations that I didn't get to have previously. Sometimes we're with people that I haven't had much chance to interact with before. So that for that I'm really grateful, because Tom really is an interesting thinker, and I look forward to future conversations with him as well, and maybe more as well, more collaborations. Anyway, it was a pleasure for me to chat to him, and I'm excited to bring you the second installment of my conversation with Tom Greder. Here we go.
Frodo, when you put something in the show, what informs you that brutal decision of putting something in or leaving something out? Why do you put stuff in a show?
I think it's different these days than it used to be, and it's different when I'm doing real sort of commercial work where people are just booking me to do these specific things in some order of another running, like a running order of 5 artists or whatever that they've put it together. Then I'm just doing my acts as they are. But when I'm doing my own shows, I'm finding more and more that when I am trying to create a new show, that I have ideas meaningful to myself that I want to express, and that I'm looking for material to go into it that will express certain things. It's like when I think of the showman, and the showman can do anything, like singing. I like to challenge myself to try to do that, and I like it that they feel like me as a person on stage can choose any medium to express myself through. And that also leaves me with, when I'm trying to make something, I am deliberately trying to find different skills or different genres of magic and juggling or whatever it is within the circus thing, or poetry, to try to express certain things. So and it led me, certainly when the last solo show I did during the pandemic, I didn't do the rackets in there because they don't fit. They're like the tennis racket act where I squeeze through the rackets. It's just like a short story, well-crafted short story with a beginning and a middle and an end. And you put that into a show, then I always am left with, I need something to pad to get it to fit in and to put on that silly costume. And then I need something afterwards to get back into the show, because it sort of sticks out. But as a result, when I then didn't put it in the show, someone invariably goes, but where was that? Oh, we expected you would do that, or at least there's the encore or something. Or so and I kind of feel like, but didn't you see what I just did in the show? Like it didn't fit in. Maybe maybe it's just because they like, oh, it was a good time, and it's just, it basically could just take it as a compliment, and that they just they like that act and remember it and brought it up in conversation. But yeah, I don't know if that answers it. It's probably a complicated question, and a lot of the time I start out with a bigger list of ideas or things that I want to go into the show, and then as I start to work through it, sometimes the show just dictates that this whole thing just doesn't fit in. Like, it might be about the same theme, but it doesn't fit into the show.
Frodo, it's interesting. I mean, I've watched numerous of your performances over the many years, and perhaps not dissimilar to me, the first things I put in were self-contained. What I'm doing on stage is what it is, and the more mature I get as a performer, I'm more tempted to put suggestive things in. Yeah. So that, I try to have the confidence to engage, to let the audience's fantasy be a bigger part of what it is that's actually happening.
That's really interesting. And I think there's a natural tendency for me anyway, it has been, after I had worked out this speech that I do on top of the cans, we're talking about following your dreams and whatever. I had sort of developed that in a very organic way in the Tiny Top, working with Trent Bauman and all this sort of stuff, where I was particularly fascinated by the preacher as a character. For in the beginning, I was sort of talking about Jesus or whatever, saying hallelujah or whatever. But then I thought I should really say something that I really think is important. And that's how I ended up with that speech. And then once I then was going to make a solo show the year after or whatever, I felt like the speech that had emerged through the doing 4 or 5 shows a day, 15-minute shows in the Tiny Top, which is a sideshow style show where it's broke outside and they come and you sell tickets for $5 or whatever. And when I then was going to write the solo show where I was saying more important things and had much more ideas in the show, I tried to explicate a little bit better what it was that I said on the cans. And that only happened a few times, because the fact that I became, because people might come up to me and say, oh, it was nice how you said that thing, and and I thought, and this is what you said, and they reiterate back to you, and you're going, that's not actually what I said, or that's not what I meant, or whatever. And I think
I heard.
yeah. And it's so and then I felt like, oh, they don't quite get what I mean. But then but by making it more specific, I just all I did was to lose more people. Leaving it more open-ended means that it speaks to everybody. So then it becomes closer to allegory than just some statement or whatever. So I think I got that lesson early, and I keep learning it again and again as well. Like, of where is, like, I mean, sometimes it's also like you can be really clear and you think that you're saying something very specific. I'm talking about the nature of what magic is in one of my pieces, and I'm being very specific as to what kind of magic I think is real. And still, people come up and they have heard something completely different. And now I just love that even when I am trying to be as specific as I can to express something, then it still comes out like a poem, like I talked about. As soon as I open my mouth and I say anything, it's just this, then that's only a part of the truth. And they pick out what they remember that was salient to them and relevant to them as it was going through.
That's a great compliment. It means that you're not being prescriptive, you're being suggestive, and they're filling in the blanks, which is occasionally some pretty strange stuff. Interpretations come back. I mean, I would totally agree with you. The biggest interesting little train show that I do all aboard has a little village in it. That's I start off there, my mum, and then I go off on a long journey. And over the many, many years that I've done the performance, the biggest comment I get after the show is usually, I grew up in a little village. And for me, that's so wonderful, because it's taking them back home, whether it's positive or negative, it's great. So they're fixated on that village. So I spent, after getting that feedback for quite some time. I spend a little more time with the village now, just, during the show. And this is the interesting thing for me. We spend so much of our lives working forwards, actually most of our lives are working forwards. The good Mr. Ibsen said that in life, things happen as a result of everything that happened before. In theatre, it's actually the other way around. Everything happens so something else can happen. And I think this is another really, really important thing for performers to remember. Never write the ending at the end, never leave writing the ending until the end, and always know where you're going to and what you're doing, what you are doing now, and the choices that you make during any particular part of the show will serve what's coming up next. That may be as simple. You got a fantastic gag. It may be as simple as removing a smaller gag before it out, so that the amplitude of the laughter and the release of joy is even greater. So that is a really, really important. I see so many students writing their way into corners, writing their way into the corner of great, but there's no end. So know where you're going, I think it's all about the end. It's all about the ending. And then once you have that ending, looking back in the show and changing things that will set that up even better. So working backwards, not always working forwards.
That's a great quote. And it's so true as well. Like me and Jay Gilligan, very thoughtful juggler, talked about this a lot of this. You need to sort of know already where it is that you want to go. Using that exact kind of language, that when you're going in and you're arriving in the studio, the shorthand is kind of, we don't want to arrive at the studio and then go, okay, we've got to create the show and go, okay, what are we going to do? Because then, and now I haven't thought of it in the structure that you said, but now that just makes total sense. Because then you just start going somewhere, and as it is with the show creation or whatever, you always have limited time. You never have enough time. So you need to sort of know, and it's such a good idea if you know already, like the emotion that you want the audience to leave with, or the trick that they want to do, or that the actual political point that you want to make, or whatever it is that is your passion. That if you know that first, then what we're doing when you're coming into the studio is what are all the ways to get to that point. And it's always struck me as well as a great observation. It's that when fiction allow the author very much to rely on coincidences. That they go, oh, you're about to be eaten by the monster, and going, oh, but it just happened to be a spear there. And then you just grab that. If you solve too many things like that with Deus Ex Machina kind of thing, and God just came in and sorted it out, it's like the person who's written himself into a corner, and then they just go, oh, but luckily, in the Roman times, somebody left a spear in this cave to stab the bear with, whatever. So, and you don't like that. So that stuff happens in real life all the time, but you don't allow it within art, because it is that artificial creation that you talked about before. It's not quite real, and in there the things does need to be justified, and the clues for the ending needs to be revealed all the way, or be redolent throughout the performance.
I think if particularly about writing shows and stuff, I think convenient is something that we have to be very, very careful of. I think convenience eliminates this question of what does it mean and why is it in the show. I think efficiency is something that's super, super important. If you use a prop, use it more than once, if at all possible. It should have a multiplicity of uses. Otherwise, leave it at home. Never bring never write a grand piano into the show just because you can't get from one point to the other without it. So I think being really efficient, and this is it's in the detail. The devil is in the detail. A good show is in the detail. Efficiency. Anything that happens on stage should happen on stage, and anything I'll leave it at that. I think everything is really, really important. The choices you make on stage, being efficient on stage. If you move, you're moving for a reason. It's not because you don't know where you're going next. All that sort of stuff. This just makes the audience, the looser the show is, or not the looser, the lazier the show is, and the less clean, the dirtier the show is, the more the audience will lean back and stop looking for the patterns, because they start to realize that not all the information is important, and they'll also get lazy. So I think you've got to keep them on point. I think you really have to be consequential. You know, I've worked with Trent Arkley-Smith, the Oscar and Strudel show, for 25 years now. We haven't performed in 3 years. I miss him. I miss Trent enormously, and Oscar misses Strudel enormously, which is an interesting experience for me. But the last time we performed, I realised it took us 24 years to get the show to where I've wanted it. And it was really one of those exceptional experiences where everything that happened on stage should have happened, and there was nothing that didn't happen that shouldn't have been there. It was effortless, easy, and it was just the most euphoric experience I've ever had. I really felt for 50 minutes I snuck out from under some sort of celestial thumb that had kept me, pinned down. One of those few times in life when you feel totally free. Yeah, when you just let go. Only took 24 years, so there's hope for us.
Well, that's right. You got to keep at it. It's the alchemical process. It's the process of doing it. Is luckily for what we do, it's already rewarding when it's happening, and then you get to a moment like that, and that's a moment of immortality right there, where you really feel free, and you are definitely working within the system. Like within martial arts or whatever, you're working within a specific system and of the show. So in a sense, you're unfree, yet within it, all of a sudden, everything clicks into place and it becomes that sounds amazing. I wish I was there.
Yeah, well, so do I. No, I was there. It was a very out-of-body experience, but again, it comes back to the whole thing of laughter. When you have laughter of different amplitudes and different intensities and stuff like that in the audience, it's also a wonderful thing. I'm not a religious person at all, but that whole notion of being one with everything, and we were talking about being present, embracing the moment. There ain't no more being present than when you're laughing. That's for me the spiritual experience, so much so that you're not even aware of it. When you're laughing, you just are,
Yeah. But I was just wanted to revisit this idea that what you do on stage only is the gift wrapping on the gift that you're delivering. Do you have any, what are your strategies and thoughts to having that conscious in your mind, and how that is revealed? Do you consciously craft what your gift is, or what's important with the performance that you're going to do? Is that very clear in your mind? And what are are there strategies that you use to kind of let that come out throughout the performance? Or just some thoughts around that?
Well, I think it comes back to the choices you make as a writer, the choices you make. That's why I asked before about how do you select what goes in and what doesn't, I think a really good starting point is starting off with something that's important to you. If it's important to you, you may not know why it's important to you, but it feels important to you. It's something that you've always looked. I always looked at little tin trains in toy shops throughout the world. So that's kind of why I went there. So I think making choices about something that you're going to explore within yourself, that you will draw on your own humanity. You're not going to act out or try to write a show based on someone else's life. You have to draw on your own humanity, and I think because it's a deep pool to draw on. Yeah. So I think choosing the form of the show, choosing the props, the objects, the story, that sort of stuff, I think has to be a very personal thing. You then have to dive into, if you have a rough skeleton of an idea, I think then you have to dive into the deeper meanings and your own interpretations of each part of along the way. So the whole show has a meaning, has a symbolism, is a metaphor, is a delivery package for a whole bunch of other stuff. But I think there are lots of mini shows in there that also have to have a content, also have to have a deeper sense and a deeper meaning. And the tricky part, and this is where the discipline comes in and the brutal decisions that sometimes have to be made, it's in the show because it means something for itself and it means something to the rest of the show as well. It's got to be damn clean and efficient and smooth and slick. It's not an easy thing to do, I really think. But I think the main thing is to start off with authenticity. For anyone starting, any of the younger performers, go with that. Go with that. Say something. I always tell people, Tom, we want to write a new show. I said, well, treat it like it's the only show you will ever get to write. In other words, put it all in there, put it on the goddamn line. Have the gut. Don't say, oh, I'll sing in the next show. Sing in this one if you've always wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So I think there is a great courage. Be very courageous. Be very courageous, but beware of the kamikaze, which is just because you can do crazy shit on stage doesn't mean you should. And it's no substitute for something authentic, Be courageous, reveal. There should be tinges of shame and embarrassment and fear and all these human things. I think you should feel them. Lastly, I think, look, it's a huge topic, but you have to believe in your story, deeply believe in your story, I think.
Yeah, it's also like there's a relationship, I think, then between discovering. So you're going for you notice a fact about yourself that you are looking at these trains, because to me, as soon as you start. I mean, I've seen you do it too, but I would imagine that anyone who's listening to it as well, just this idea of a toy train. And within the context of a clowning kind of sensibility and with the vulnerability that you're expressing that always comes out in your performance, that to me, it screams of meaning, or like it becomes symbolic, everything, and a person who thinks of their own village and a journey through lives and the things that you see. But when you were drawn towards the trains, I mean, you first then took the decisions to buy them and to make it. How much comes from it's just an interesting thing, how much comes from just exploring the images of, like, because do is that you sort of build the train drives at a certain speed and you're building the train lines as you go a little bit in parts of it, which is like, how much of it is it that I have something meaningful that I want to say, so what can I do with the train, and how much comes from actually just creating the images in the space, like what's the sort of dialectic there?
Well, look, it's interesting. First thing is leave the comedy to last. I think.
Oh, good point.
Leave the comedy to last. I'll just fill you in on it. I started developing the idea of the All Aboard show because I was sick and tired of throwing plastic objects around in the air. But I thought, what a shame to throw all the things I've learned, all the dexterous skills that I've learned. What a shame to throw them away. Can't I juggle with something other than plastic objects? So that tied in very, very nicely. So I was looking for some more metaphorical, that would allow me to tell stories. Of course, I then stumbled across that idea, and I thought, hey, yeah, I tried it, fantastic. Then another important point is there has to be conflict. If there's no conflict, it's not interesting. I think that's important to factor into the show. So
So always go, what is it that is what is stopping you from reaching your goal? I'm going to squeeze through these 2 rackets, and it goes like this, and then it becomes clear that even though it seemed like a straightforward thing, this is going to be a whole lot more difficult, and that's where all the slapstick or so comes in. So there's got to be something that prevents the clown from getting to wherever they want. So I totally agree.
That's the Greek roadmap of theatre. Who is this and what do they want? Why do they want it? What stops them? What do they need to do to get it? And do they fail or succeed? That's the basic roadmap of any decent story. There are variations on that, but there has to be the killing of the Cyclops. There has to be that critical moment some part of the way through the show. But getting back to the All Aboard show, so what conflict can I have? All right, I started off with it's a birthday gift, so I actually have a gift on stage that pays, but what's inside and fueling all that fantasy in the audience, what comes out is the little train and not enough track to make a complete circuit. There's the rub. And I thought that's a nice metaphor for life anyway. So the first initial experimentations were as a cabaret routine, which is, that's my son, which is the curtain opens and there's a guy on stage with train track coming towards him with a box of train tracks, and he's sort of sanding them and putting them together. And all of a sudden from off stage comes the locomotive trundling along. So he's got to get to the other end of the stage. That was the way I first started with it, just a short little routine. He pulls out short pieces, curved pieces, round pieces, he's got to get to the end of the stage. Very, very simple idea. And that's what triggered me with this metaphor for life and everything like that. The decisions you then make, once you have the rough idea, okay, train, I realised by that stage in my life, I'd already been so experienced at train travel, all over the world, lost on trains, wrong trains. We didn't have GPS, we didn't have, mobile phones or the internet. It was all just maps and getting lost and trying to be found. So I thought the dramaturgy was my own experiences about traveling the world on trains. What happens? What are the kinds of people that you come across? The Swiss train conductor, I live in Switzerland these days, is such an easy model to go on. And he's in me. I mean, I was born here, so he's totally in me. So you go on the things that flow from themselves. You don't have to script the characters. You may tweak them and everything, but there's a real authenticity and it's in you, or it's your uncle or your mother or whatever it happens to be. And then I think you start, where am I going? Where am I going? And yes, it's a circular show. It comes back to where it started. And I thought, but you can't just end the same way. A transition has to take place in this protagonist. So I looked for what changes in him, what shifts, and there you kind of have the nuts and bolts of it. And then you'll just start exploring, spending 6 weeks in a rehearsal space with 2 sections of track and a train. Figure it out. Let your fantasy go. There's this whole crystallization process, the first part of which is expand outwards. Don't look, have ideas about it, write them down. They may not link to anything else, but they may. If they interest you about this theme, there's something to them. Have confidence in that. Then crystallize, try to cobble it together into some sort of sense, then go outwards again. And then, simple solutions to blocks. Close your eyes and think, I don't know what's going to happen next. What would I, if I'm in the audience, like to happen next? Should it be something fast or slow? Or do I have a concrete vision? Ask yourself, I'm in the audience, what would I like? What do I need to happen now? What needs to change now and how? You come at it from Frodo, you come at it from so many different perspectives, and The biggest thing I learned was by performing it. We all know that you can script your ass off for 6 months and the best ideas come from opening night.
Yeah, that's right. I love this. What would the audience like? Because that, I think, is not done enough. That's a generalization, but
just a second. I think it's putting yourself in the audience. What would I, when you're writing a show, what would I, if I'm in the audience, like to see happen now? I am very cautious about writing for the audience. I'm very cautious about writing for a perceived audience. I think the more experience you have as a performer, the more trust and faith you can have in yourself that you will factor the audience in any way, automatically, intuitively as a writer. You will factor them in anyway, because you know if you don't, you'll die on stage. So I think we learned that lesson very quickly.
It's very interesting point that it's like it's you in the audience. And you could probably also, in the same way that you say, I know this Swiss train conductor character. I know him enough to be able to act in the way that that person would do. And in a sense, you could also take that Swiss train conductor and put him in the audience too. Like you can be making it going, what would that go?
Interesting.
When I'm and that's what I mean with what the audience is, and what people who then write, like I read a lot of genre fiction with sci-fi or horror or so, and to step outside of what to want to be a literary writer or whatever, and just the story for a audience which you think like, and some authors say that they write kind of for in their mind they have like a couple of people that they are writing specifically for these people. I think that's really good for the specificity of it too. But of course, you always know yourself best. So to put them in the audience. And I also know that Penn and Teller, two magicians who are very good, Teller always has in his mind that when they are creating, we should always remember that the audience is smarter than us. So never dumb it down. And I thought that was like, I don't know of anyone that says that, because it's so common that people go, they won't notice. 3 balls, 5 balls, they don't care.
Frodo, it's a fatal mistake to make. I think, I play a lot of sport, particularly when I was younger. And when you play a better tennis player, you lift your game lifts. So really elevate them. The thing is, people, you can dumb them down intellectually, but inside, in their intuitions and their fantasy, they're in a darkened room. They've paid for their ticket, maybe not a lot, but they've paid. They're invested in the show. They're counting on you to transport them to places that they don't normally want to go, but they need to go, or they don't have the trust to go themselves. So they're in. So there's no dumbing people down in terms of their intuitions, their feelings, their hopes and ambitions, and particularly their fantasy. So elevate them. If you're going to write for the audience, make sure you're writing for the most sophisticated, sensitive, elegant, dignified audiences of all.
And lift them up. And what better example of that is yours truly sitting there watching the show. So you like,
yes, precisely,
in a funny way, of course. But it is true, like, because you see yourself always as multifaceted. I am different, experienced differently by my wife and my daughter, and by my father, and by the people who watch me. They all see a different version of it. It's only a narrow version of who I am. And in my mind, I am all those things. But to that person, I am this. This is the full reality of it, or whatever. So by putting yourself in the audience specifically, and to think of that, I love that as a technique, going, what would I love? What happens in this show? Because we all watch shows, and some we love and some we don't love. And I always take that as like the challenge is then to always not just go, why did I love it, or why did I not love, is to go, what exactly is it that I didn't like, and what would I do different? And in that sort of active participatory way of watching the show, you are growing as an artist no matter what you see. Because if you always relate it back to yourself, or whether I'm reading, and I read a lot of biology and I read philosophy, I'm always relating it back directly to me as the showman and my point of view. And in that, you sort of have this active, ongoing conversation. And I love that.
There's the artist. I think there's the artist speaking in you. You know, that is not dominated by the person or the character. You know, you have this sort of, outer perspective, looking down over things, and it's a busy experience on stage. But Frodo, you know, when you're sitting in the audience, and you know, if I'm working with a company or whatever, or an actor, and they come to a block in the show, they don't know what happens next. I say, well, what would you like to see happening next? You know, close your eyes, and what do you see? I say, I don't see anything. I say, well, okay, well, let's use a simpler vocabulary. You can work with a different scale, a different tempo, a different rhythm, or a different form. Are any of those things tricky? If that's all you can give me, let's write it down, and that's at least progress. So you think that it should now slow down. Great. Let's move on. Maybe something will fall into there. You know, people tend to work chronologically. Now I'm writing this part of the show. What happens next? What happens next? What happens next? I think it's much better off, at least for me, to start with a jumble, and then try to puzzle it together in one way or another, and then fill out the holes, and then expand and explore and try. But so, you know, if you come across blocks in the show, think simple. What would you like to see in simple terms, rather than trying to come up with this fantastic gag or whatever straight away?
Yeah, it'll always grow. And also there's a really important, that thing you said, you write and you write, and I use the metaphor of birth. Everything that you do until you do your premiere, it's no matter how well scripted and how rehearsed and how in depth your creation has been, this is just the pregnancy. The show doesn't come into the world as an actual being until it meets its audience. And then from then on start the education of who the show is. When it comes out first, it doesn't know whether it's this way or the other way, or it can't sit, it can't walk, it doesn't know who it is, it doesn't know its gender or its sex or anything. It goes along the way and finds out who it is, and it has its own individuality 100%, but it's shaped by the world as well. The show it doesn't just come out and say, I am this and it's finished. I want to express myself as clearly and as like to be understood as deeply as I can. And to do that, the world will also be shaping me into expressing myself in the best kind of way. So to me, it's like I always feel that it's like, even when the show is sort of done and it comes out, the shows like you talk about with Oscar and Strudel, 24 years in, you go, there was the perfect show. And in that, there's been the creation from nothing to perfection. And that only happens through when at the end of each season, you go, I don't know how I could do this show until I had these had now in this season, 12 years in. Finally, we've cracked it. And then you keep discovering things. So 24 years later, you still end up with the perfect show.
Yeah, we've cracked it, and the next show you suck. I mean, you know, that's the other. It's a tough one. The performing arts, you know, it'll always humility. Humility will always tap you on the shoulder, you know. But again, it's so many variables, so many aspects. The audience, the planets, who knows, all this other stuff lining up, and I guess it goes to show how fragile a balance it is to get that show right. I think if you're writing a show, you can give opening night a better chance of success or a worse one. I think leaving space is important, particularly for an opening night. Not, you know, the tendency is to control and nut everything out exactly how it's going to go. I think it'll be stiff. So having the confidence to, you know, it's a premiere night, leaving some space, and then developing, you know, having the courage to. It's only by leaving space that you will, every performance you do, you will learn something. Yeah. Yeah.
Or like I think that's. I see the performance of the show also as a dialogue where the audience is constantly telling you how well something resonated with them. And by listening to that and by taking notes, if you're so inclined, afterwards to go, why is this, like, this was good, or like to find, if you're doing an act or you're doing a show, like to go, at least it's got to be one thing each time where you go, oh, that was interesting. They liked this bit, or they didn't like this, or why was that? And if you're reflecting on those things as you go, then the show that will be growing. And in the beginning, huge decisions can change depending on them. And then once you've done 24 years in, you do these relatively subtle changes, but sometimes that can really change the whole kind of context of the show as well. So I feel like you're working on finer and finer details, but sometimes those fine details really can permeate throughout the show and change the kind of whole experience of it.
Oh, I think it also, the detail, the attention to detail encourages the audience to maintain or deepen their trust in you. Absolutely. And without that trust, all you can do is twist balloons. All you can do is entertain them at best, really. Yeah. It's interesting, we mentioned before about placing yourself in the audience, trying to, imagine what you would like to see next. You just triggered me. Maybe the other is also true, that you modulate the show and you adapt the show as you go on stage. So, they breathe with you, they share impulses with you. They might not be exactly the same impulses that you have, but when you have an impulse shift on stage, guaranteed they will also have one that they try to make sense of. So I think you have to acknowledge those absolutely every time on stage. For me, the easiest way to do that is by pausing or by looking. You have to acknowledge when there's an impulse shift. I think it's really, really important. Otherwise, you start breaking the trust that you have. Going back again to that thing of, the audience looks and you go, that was information, but not for him. So it's not important. So I'm just this show isn't actually quite as intricate as I thought.
Yeah. It's connected a little bit to jugglers of when they drop. What happened when they dropped? Do we just pick it up and pretend it didn't happen because something else went on and that thing becomes a mistake? Or does the drop, how to, and the drop is just it's like a shorthand for when something which wasn't, when the audience and everyone understands that something happened that wasn't intended happened. How is that dealt with? And to a clown, of course, this is the perfect opportunity. But sometimes to a juggler or a physical performer or whatever, you just pretend that it didn't happen and everyone goes, okay, well, everyone's pretending didn't happen. And that creates a situation.
Isn't that interesting? We were talking about before about the flyers in the circus and the clowns in the circus. Where a drop is crushing for a juggler is when that juggler is trying to be immortal. There's no saving it. There's absolutely no saving it. But where a drop isn't crushing for a juggler is when they're much more the human side of things, when it's just an excuse to deliver something else. When what the juggler does is what it is, it's crushing. So again, because there's no saving that. There's just no saving it,
Yeah, and it has to do with your what relationship you set up with this thing that happens. Where in a classical performance of a piano piece and somebody plays the wrong chords, it might destroy the whole creation of music that was there, and it just falls apart. In the way that if you set up that expectation as a juggler, then it falls apart with it. Whilst if you imagine someone else, who I think on the other end of the spectrum, that if the wrong chord comes out when Tom Waits is playing something, the importance of the emotional telegraphing is much more important than the technical skill that is trying to deliver it. And you keep listening to the meaningful message that's coming out throughout the noise around it. And then his framing of it, although he of course knows I guess it's a caricature of him or whatever, because of course he knows what he does when he's playing it, but he's looking for the untuned piano or the thing, so that you can speak your truth through a broken instrument or whatever, and somehow the truth comes out even stronger through that. So some of that is through the framing, and it is his truth, which the classical pianist couldn't tell that kind of truth but maybe, or not maybe, like it has yet to be proven that Tom Waits could play Little Fugue in G minor by Bach and transcend you into the realms that does when you hear this piece. So I guess
that's so authentic, though, isn't it?
Authenticity, yeah. And how do you like? Because authenticity is a complex thing. How do you think of of what authenticity actually is? If you try to sort of put some words on what it is to act authentically, or to whatever, or be authentic, what does that mean?
It means something to you. That what you do, what you say, what you feel means something to. Well, not what you feel. If you feel it, then obviously it means something to you. But I think authenticity is and also quite brutal, yeah. In that it is the things that are important to you are authentic, and the things that mean something to you are authentic. And I think that honesty is absolutely important to that. Again, I don't propose, I watched a performance I was asked by a director in Tasmania many years ago to look at a work in progress that they were doing. There was 6 or 7 real monologues of quite awful things: houses burnt down, lost children. These were stories. It was an amateur theatre company. And I went to see it, and it was painful to watch. It was painful to watch these monologues because they were the real people that it happened to. I then suggested maybe if they're all working together, maybe they tell each other stories instead. And apparently it worked well. So wow. I'm not proposing to go on stage and just say real shit about you and your shitty life or your experiences. No, that's not theatre. The audience recognises the difference between reality and a theatrical fantasy. Theatrical fantasy allows them to laugh at someone's misfortunes, to weep at someone's sorrows. It allows them to fully engage their fantasy and let it go without fear of recrimination or shame. Reality doesn't. So we know the difference between a forum and a theatre performance. So I think being authenticity on stage is about drawing on what's important to you, but twisting it in a theatrical sense. Making it safe for the audiences. In other words, rising above your own shit, releasing itself from your own shit and understanding the human condition and understanding, to live is to die and to all that sort of stuff. And that's why the dramaturgy is so important, is to understand why you might feel something or why something is important to you. And twisting that enough. In the All Aboard show, I have a mother in it. It's actually my father. But when I played him as my father, it was maybe a little too close to the bone. I was not able to make fun of him or it. And I shifted it to a mother figure. Same thing. It was still about my dad, but it released me. I was able to rise above it. So I think this is really important. So authenticity on stage draws from your own human experience, but is not a direct representation of it. If that makes any sense, Frodo.
It makes so much sense. That's really beautiful, the way that came out. That's amazing. Because it is also true. Like I often use the shorthand of going, well, we're not doing theatre therapy. This is not here for you to feel better. And there are forums for that, but that's not usually the kind of work that I'm involved at creating or improving or whatever. It's for a different kind of market. And there's something there about like the kind of truth or the kind of authenticity that belongs or that sits well in the show. It's exactly that thing. It is all make-believe, but it is experienced as truth or as truthful because I have this thought that truth isn't something, in theatrical context at least, if not in the rest as well, that truth is something that happens as opposed to something that is. You can tell the story, and it can be written by a great writer and be directed by another person, and then the actor comes out and they deliver it, and it becomes truthful in the delivery of that, even though they didn't write the words or even dictate the full extent of their gestures or so, or what they do throughout the piece. So the theatrical truth is something that happens, and the fact that it is being told through art, it's being told through writing, it's being told through a painting or whatever it is, that where the truth that comes out, it isn't the same as nature, because nature is kind of the tree and the plant or the whatever, they are one thing, but then you put those together in a picture and all of a sudden this starts to mean all sorts of other things. But all the additional is stuff that is experienced just through the human being. It is just a tree, it is just a so anyway, maybe I'm a bit nebulous compared to how straightforward you were, but this is a really interesting concept, that the truth that's being told on stage maybe is stronger told when it is once removed, or if you are telling a story about something awful, a child disappearing or a house burning down, that you need to find one level of abstraction that, okay, even though this story, if this was what happened to me, somehow the point of the story needs to be something else than that it was awful that the house burned down, that there needs to be a level of abstraction, and that could rotate, that you tell the story of the lost child when it was your house that burned down, and you find a resonance with that somehow makes it more allegorical so more people can connect to it.
I think the audience,
very interesting.
It might be easier. An alternative to that might be what you do on stage has to have one impulse from you, has to resonate in one sense with you, and everything else can be completely different. But a little bit like the method acting, I guess. If you have an emotional content, for the audience, it's about, does something gel or not? Is this person is this believable or not? And that doesn't happen here in the audience. It happens in the gut. Yeah. It happens in the gut. So I think, coming back to almost the beginning of our conversation, I think there has to be a great humanity in what you do on stage. And I think we use the word character. I think you define a character not by their perfections, but by a person's imperfections. It's either eccentric, idiosyncratic, or crazy, but that's how you define someone's character. Wow, he's such an amazing character, in real life. So how something gels with the audience. Is it believable on a cellular level, on a gut level? Does it make some sort of sense? Is it plausible that this is happening, or that that's how this character would feel about it, or what they would say about it? I think that is a decision the audience makes very, very quickly. And you on stage may not even know why you play something in a particular way, but does it fucking gel for you too? Does it feel right for you too? Don't overthink it. Feel it. Why timing and rhythm and everything, taking the magic of the pause, that discomfort where the audiences will lean forward because they need relief from this, and the performer's courage to embrace that discomfort and use it for their own advantage. Frodo, there's so many things to being on stage that can make or break.
Yes, there is. And we should probably round off now, but there's still so many things that I would love to, ideas that you have already fielded to me that we didn't even get to touch on. And also, I'd love to, at one point, dig deeper into the nuts and bolts of what it is like teaching. And for instance, with Code Arts, which I've had some experience of talking to one person that's come out of the school that's now doing a project, and what it is like, because I also have these conversations with Jay Gilligan, who is also doing a bunch of teaching at the school in Stockholm. So, because all these ideas that we're talking about now, I'd like to maybe hit you up one other time and talk about how do we convey some of these that feels a little bit abstract when you're just talking about it now. And how does that really get these ideas? How can you transplant them into students? Maybe we'll talk about that at another time.
Frodo, it would be a pleasure. I mean, after 30 odd years of teaching, it still interests me to how to help first to identify where are students looking, how to shift where they look, and how to shift the choices that they make to be better, more effective choices as performers. I mean, from my experiences, some people need their hand held, the others need their ass kicked, but the vast majority need their hand held while you're kicking their ass. So,
That's great.
I'm totally happy to talk to you about that. I have some questions for you, because there are still some challenges that I have that I find difficult to get through. There's no way I can give someone 35 years of experience in a five-week workshop. You've just got to do the hard yards. Get your ass on stage, fail,
Absolutely.
and learn how to swim.
Yeah, I mean it's true, and it's like that's certainly a huge topic to explore, like the role of what a circus school does in creating an artist. This guy in the same of what an art school. What is the goal of each particular school or whatever? So very interesting, and I don't have much experience in teaching. I usually come in on the end when somebody is already in the process of creating something, and but I am more and more kind of interested in that starting point when you meet people who, and I think back to myself, who I was when I in '96 did a 3-month course in circus, which is all of the sum total of my education in any kind of institution for this, but like who I was and what I expected from the school or whatever. Anyway, it's very, very big, interesting, and it's been so nice to talk to you. We haven't. This is probably the most we have spoken in ever, and it's been really nice. And I loved the little backs and forths that we had of the act of creation. I found that book online in a sort of facsimile, or whatever it's called, where it's just a PDF, so whatever. So it was quite difficult to read, and it's a complex text, but maybe that's something we could delve into as well. And I don't know if I could already, in just the way that you were breaking down the structure of a joke, I seem to remember that in that first chapter, that's something that he delves into very early on in, what's his name, Kostler?
Arthur Kostler,
that wrote that book. Arthur Kostler, that he delves into that. So that's rich territory, and it's even just to that talk about like books, that because not all circus performers, a lot of people end up in circus because they are physical people, and not all people also read books on how to be an artist, even, because it's true, everybody writes circus artist on their CV or on when they describe themselves, but maybe the emphasis is strongly on the circus and not so much exploring what the artistic process is. And so on. We got to touch on your artistic process today a little bit with the train, but we didn't even talk about your Kino cinema project, which takes performance and improvisation and everything to a whole another level again. So I'd love to talk about that too.
Oh, look, so it's interesting, the Panorama Kino Theatre and the workshops, how closely they're related. The more I've taught over the years, the more that folds back to my performing. My performing also folds back onto the workshops. I encourage you to try it once. The whole teaching thing. It's interesting how much you recognise the blocks in the students and the challenges, because you've been there yourself, or are still there yourself, all of that sort of stuff. But Frodo, all respect to your fabulous work, and perhaps even more so to your fascination with digging into these topics a little bit more intellectually, but with pleasure and fun. Look forward to talking again.
Excellent. That's great. This is the perfect thing, teaching and Kino mixed together. Looking forward to that one. Great. All right. Thanks a lot. And I'll hope to see you down the road.
I'm sure we will, Frodo. All the best.
All right. So ends the conversation with Tom Greder, and I certainly felt like my mind was expanded a bit after having those chats, and I hope you got some gems as well, some thoughts, because that is really one of the things that I really enjoy when I'm sitting and reading, or when I am watching a lecture or a conversation on YouTube. Every now and then somebody brings something up that just pops in me, and I go, oh wow, that's connected to this, and that's connected to this. Something in my active listening, my active reading, that I go, that idea, that is so, it just sends off this great sense of joy. And I think that is that's what's pushing me on intellectually and in my pursuit of grasping the world. It's those little kicks. And I hope you got one of those little kicks of connections today. And if not, then perhaps you will next week, when we are lucky enough to tune back in again in more lively and more wide-spanning and jumping conversation with Gareth Bjorlund again. Talking about further ingredients of comedy, or he has thought more about it. We had this conversation a while ago, and we were quite jovial. So anyway, I'm looking forward to present that to you. And one of the great things that also, I was in Australia just a little while ago, and I got to hand out and sell a bunch of my t-shirts that. And it has been such a joy on social media to just see people walk around with these t-shirts. My friend Shep Huntley sporting it proudly in several situations, and his daughter as well. And seeing, it's just been so nice. Al Miller also sent a picture of him wearing it, and so great to see you all out there sporting the logo. And from what I understand from little conversations, there are people who look at the logo, beautiful logo that my wife has made, Miranda, and that people are interested. There's something in it. I tried actually to make it work, or I said she, Miranda, tried to make it work so that I could say just follow the way on it, so that you wouldn't have the word showman in it, and it would seem even more cryptic and like some esoteric cult society. But I couldn't make that quite fit. But perhaps in the future I would have some enameled badges or something. Anyway, enough random speculation at the end of a long episode. Well, until next time, all that's left to be said is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.